Hey everybody, this is Dan Keldsen with Infocap. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Infocap, and this podcast, Next Future Today, is all about empowering people to decide how they want to purposely create their future, whether that's personally or professionally within the context of leading an organization or being an employee of an organization in the service of members or citizens or constituents or whoever it is that your organization works for to deliver. Then this is the point of this podcast, is to highlight people that I've found that are doing really great work and have backgrounds that perhaps we can all learn from to make it much more likely that we can purposely create our next future starting right now. Today's guest is Larry Gioia. He's the emerging technology leader in PwC's Commercial Technology Innovation Office, CTIO. If you have not been following PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, they probably know them from 20 years ago as one of the big four accounting firms, but they're far more than that and have been for quite a while. And what's interesting about Larry's background is that the team that he leads is a prime example of how to really do focused innovation to empower people. It's kind of core to the beliefs that I held back in the 2006, 2008 era of Enterprise 2.0. And that sort of social enterprise movement was another way that it was talked about. Enterprise social, knowledge management 2.0, went by a bunch of names, but this is Larry's team, and the kind of culture run the way that I understand it of PwC really does expect that innovation is not just the team of a bunch of mad scientists or computer scientists as it might be locked away in a lab, but it's really about how do we enable more people to do innovation in a focused way by learning both what are the best practices and what are some of the worst practices that you don't need to fail and fall into necessarily. I've talked to Larry a couple times, sort of off the record. Always surprising what we can come up with when we're talking. Happily, a whole bunch of things that I talked about with Tom Koopoulos, my co-author in the Gen Z Effect back in 2014, that I haven't heard a lot in recent years. And I never really heard them all that much anyhow, specifically reverse mentoring as a real huge benefit in driving more innovation by just tapping into the new hires, new graduates, rather than relying on purely the experienced people to do innovation. Anyhow, we covered a lot. We could cover a lot more than we did. I think it'll be very interesting because the PwC, I would say, historically not known for innovation. It's more about caution and accounting, which is normally pretty serious stuff and well codified and regulated. But it turns out there's room for innovation in lots of different areas. So anyhow, I think this is really fun. And why don't we just get right to it? Here we go. Larry, we've met, I don't know, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years ago when I first started Plexicam. I think you were one of our earliest customers, and now in my role at Infocap, got you on here so we can talk even deeper.
Still here. It's good to see you, Dan. Obviously, it's the days of COVID, and you're exactly right. My Plexicam, I'm still looking at you and your device that I found during COVID, and I'm very happy to be with you today. It's awesome to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, and we can go in even deeper, different directions that we've talked about in the past, because now I'm in control. No, but I'm a big believer in collaboration and innovation. Got to peeking into your background. I used to live outside of Pittsburgh for 8 years or so that connection. I'm gonna have to come back and have you give me a tour of what's changed, because I haven't been back in like 30 years.
Well, to say the least, for your listeners, anybody who has not been to Pittsburgh, please come, please visit. As a Pittsburgher, it's changed a lot, not just in 30 years, decades of time, Dan. Just in the past 5 years, with not just innovation and tech, but just the city at large. It's not what our grandfather thinks it was or used to be. It's very different. It's an awesome place to be. I'm happy to be here still to this day and call it home. It's great.
Yeah, I miss it. Although I live in the Boston area, and it's similar kind of feel. Having grown up there is slightly different. Let's talk innovation. So, how long have you been at PwC at this point?
Yeah, so been at PwC proper since 2011. So I guess doing the math, 14 years now, if math.
Yeah,
is mathing today. But haven't always been at PwC, but yeah, still here and love being here. It's an awesome firm, and I can do some really great work. I think we've got a lot of similarities in what we've been doing. But yes, the PwC and the innovation space, and it's been a really wild ride, to say the least.
when we talked previously, to me, what's fascinating about innovation is defining the damn thing. Like, innovation is only for Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or, whatever. Fill in your favorite white guy. And that sets a certain bar that's pretty high, right? So for me, I'm more about what can we do to democratize innovation and make it so that it's just normal. It's like, this is the way that we think all the time. We're either, I talk about small I innovation, which is like continuous improvement, sort of lean stuff, Kaizen. And then big I innovation, which is, we are creating the next huge market segment of whatever the heck it is that we're talking about, right? You've been involved in pretty large scale innovation efforts. Like, what got you into doing that? And what's sort of the approach of what you're doing for innovation within PwC? For yourself, for PwC itself, or for customers, whichever direction you want to take it.
Yeah, maybe a little backdrop, Dan, to kind of set the stage for how we, and perhaps your audience thinks about innovation. I love the big I, little I. For myself as a technologist at heart, and kind of growing up as a technologist, as an entrepreneur first. Failed a lot, succeeded a few times. I don't know, do you even success and fail as an entrepreneur? But at its core, I say that, Dan, as a point of orientation, as a builder, right? I've always loved building technology, community, and obviously everything that encompasses that. And so I want to make sure when we talk about innovation, there's technology innovation, there's business model innovation, product innovation. So innovation can be tied to many things. I come from an angle of, yes, as an entrepreneur, and then joined a smaller firm out of grad school. I won't even date myself there. I've already given you the insight with 15 years at PwC. But 8 years prior to that, Dan, and with a smaller strategy firm where I was, in the heart of leading technology transformation, which we know is a fun word to throw around. At its core, it was about thinking differently as an enterprise architect. And I'm just going to go there, Dan, of how I grew up in the world of innovation is not just thinking about technology for the sake of technology. It's really critical. I think you subscribe to the same. We have to not just bring along the people, but people-led innovation and the technology that empowers us to do that. But then thinking about culture and change and all those things. So that long-winded backdrop, Dan, to say, I'm not coming at this from the angle of just technology for the sake of technology. And I carried all that through my own career and the roles that I've taken therein. Yes, as a consultant in the market, now leading our emerging technology group here at PwC, which is pretty awesome, getting the best of being with clients every single day, but also innovating with a firm. And I say all of that because something I like to maybe to start from a place of this is that in many big organizations, and you kind of hit on this, whether it's Zuckerberg or Jobs, it's the capital I innovation in big organizations. Yes, the goal, maybe is to move fast and break things. I think that was maybe Zuckerberg, if we can say who that was. I like to suggest it's really important to move fast, but don't break trust. And that's really critical for me as we think about kind of moving this organization and our teams at the core of all innovation, whether that be business model, process reinvention, or whatever it might be. It comes down to trust.
Yeah, so it's funny that, so you brought up culture, change management. There's plenty of, the only person that likes to change is a baby and changing the diaper, right? Which is, it's kind of insulting, I think. What I found in my experience, and also, did we ever talk about Dan Pink's drive?
Only on the periphery of our last conversation, but let's go.
Okay.
I don't know of it myself, but let's go there.
Okay, so he talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose is sort of that's the driver of, if you want to have an engaged employee base, which to me that's the most interesting side of the space for some reason. It's harder than the consumer side, where you have like billions of dollars you can market and drum up change, but you can take the same ideas and apply them to the employee side. So his point is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Thankfully, he made it nice and simple for somebody like me to remember 10, 15 years after I read it. But if you have that, then people, it's not that they fear change. They fear change that they can't trust, to your point, that just plops out of nowhere. And, you just changed my job without consulting me, that it was actually perfectly fine. It's this other system that you didn't even know about that's before us or after us. Or, there's lots of things that happen like that, and especially in large organizations, because there's just so much stuff moving around. What do you do or how do you think as far as sort of framing in that sort of lens.
Yeah, and it's an awesome topic. I'm so happy we're starting with this as opposed to digging deep on like what's happening with agentic AI, because that could be a podcast unto itself, which we could talk about. But I'm so happy that you're framing this, and I hope your listeners are thinking the same way. Is look, leadership in the age of AI is radically changing, and we know that. And I say that nothing has changed. Everything's changed, but nothing has changed. Like cut it back to its core for how I lead and my peers lead. Like this is about empowerment, as far as I'm concerned. This is about giving our people. I say our people in general, like the agency with the tools that they need to I'll just say get stuff done, get work done, GSD, pick your S there, what do you want to do? And empowering them and entrusting them to say, look, like you're not going to have all the answers and we're going to figure this out as we go, but empowering people to adapt on their own terms. And it was a podcast I was on during COVID, and we talked about this less in the frame, Dan, of innovation. But there was this kind of, everyone was like, what's going to happen to my job? What's going to happen to the world? And here we are still now in the age of AI asking the same questions. But I'll stand behind how I think about this is agency, giving people the agency to do what they think is best with guardrails, of course, empowering them with tools to do their job, right? But also, candidly, we talk often at PwC, and because one of our newest leaders came from AWS, it's the adage of kind of two-way doors. Like make a decision and move forward with it. But there's a one-way. It's like a decision we can make, and if we have to, we'll reverse it and bring it back. That's a one-way door decision. But a two-way door decision is like, hey, like, or it's the other way around, excuse me, where you make a decision.
I think it's the other way.
You can't reverse that.
Yes.
You get the point, though. I say that we've really adopted that. And again, it comes back to making sure our people just understand that, not because we as a leadership team are saying this is how thou shalt do it, but we're empowering you with the tools, capability, and the decision rights to say, hey, we can reverse things if we have to, but just go. Move fast. Don't break too many things. But it comes back to trust. So what it goes back to, Dan, is we're entrusting our teams to make good decisions and do what's right for their clients, our clients, and the business, and doing so within a regulated environment, which is also adds additional fun to the equation.
Yeah. I still have not managed. I'm gonna have to try this with Sora or one of the video generators. But I've always had this this idea that so there's the bell curve of adoption. I think we talked about that offline. Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, Roger Everett's same thing. Fusion of Innovation. So there's you're somewhere on a continuum of ability and interest in innovating, right? And how soon do you participate in something? And one of my ideas was, and this was when I had an office in the second tallest skyscraper in Boston. And while I'm going up and down these godforsaken huge elevators, taking my time getting between floors, I was like, what is it? So, like not choosing to innovate is a decision that has ramifications, right? And if everybody else is going across this bell curve of adoption and you've decided to stay, you're not staying in one point relative to everybody else. You're going backwards. Actually.
You're going backwards. Literally going backwards. You're forcing yourself backwards. Yeah, it's a very good analog. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, which used to really irritate me, and I mean it still does, because for me, I also I'm a technologist, but I'm a humanist. So I got really interested in I wanted to do computer stuff because it's cool and it makes life easier. You can do it better, faster, cheaper, and then that stuff gets taken away and let me focus on something else, which I realize not everybody else wants to do. But creating that environment where people can choose where they want to be on the spectrum, and from your own company culture standpoint, finding people who are on the edges of they want to be the last people to innovate, and then the other people who are like me and you, I think that I always want to innovate and see what the new thing is and try to figure it out and make it happen and create something from very vague stuff that's expensive and hideous and chunky. If you take those extremes, then you can pull it all together, and maybe you don't get consensus, but you get enough of a gelling that you can then go forward, and it doesn't, from the individual person standpoint, it doesn't feel like this dropped out of the sky because the new AWS guy told us that we have to do that.
That's right. And again, if Matt's going to listen to this, I hope he does. It's not because Matt said so. This is just, reinforcing what we've already been doing. And again, it didn't necessarily say that we had to take someone from the outside, but that's the kind of, I would say, we take innovation not just very seriously, but we take it's core to our culture. And you said it yourself, but I was going to double down on it from a place, Dan, of like, we don't just have this incubator, like incubators of like, those are the folks who do innovation. 75,000 people in the US, 350 plus globally. And I say this, everyone's an innovator. Like everyone has the agency and the ability to create something new, from brand new associates coming out of school, because that's where I think the real like magic is yet to be goal to be mined. Associates all the way to senior partners and global leaders. We want ideas, we want concepts. We talk about convergence a lot, Dan. The convergence not just of technology, of course we can talk about that, but I can talk often about convergence of what happens when we do reverse mentorship. It's not always, we're 175 years old, right? What was ultimately, I'm going to speak openly from a place, it's very much a mentorship model, apprenticeship model. That does not change. There's always this perception of coming down from upon high, we're going to do this, and then we just did it. The reverse mentorship model for me, from an innovation perspective, is the associate who's fresh out of school has just as many cool ideas. They may not know the business context, but they have as many ideas as the decades-old senior partner. And when you put those two together, whereby someone who's been around the block for decades can learn something that a new hire, because otherwise they just know that kind of as digital natives, whatever we want to use these days. There's magic to be had there. I talk about connecting dots often, Dan. Those are the dots that we try to inculcate with our culture on a daily basis. And even more so, Dan, let me share this from a place of, we don't want, I tell you that because we don't want just pockets of innovation. We don't want, yes, I have the good fortune of leading an amazing team who is focused on innovation, but we're not doing that for the entire firm solely. We like to say stir the pot a lot, right? In a good way. I talk about not breaking trust, but it's our job to think and do, not just think big, but think and show what's probable, right? And get our clients thinking differently, get our teams thinking differently, so that they can then go take that, evangelize it, build on it. Because without some dedicated focus, on what it means to innovate and innovate at scale, it becomes lost in the other metrics of the organization. And we found through a study last year that the organizations, the M-Tech accelerators, are those who dedicate energy and focus on incubating innovation in the enterprise, but then permeating that outwards versus being a side hustle. So I know I kind of went off tangent a little bit, Dan, but it's really important that not just a side hustle. We want everyone to be doing this every single day. And I think it just kind of bodes to the story that we have been telling now and continue to show up in the market in a very different way for how we think about AI, but leading first with AI, but obviously innovation at large. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing up reverse mentorship, because that's one of the things that I'm proudest of from the Gen Z effect that my partner Tom and I wrote in 2014.
You were well ahead of your time, by the way. And thank you for not having that just on the ready, but having it on the ready, because I haven't read your book yet. I ordered it last time we talked about. So there's that.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, it's and part of my interest in reverse mentorship, because so I spend a lot of time doing knowledge management consulting, which comes and goes as a term, but there's something to be said for. I also spend a lot of time at enterprise search, and there's this whole thing about search and relevance. Are you looking for a needle in a haystack? Are you looking for a particular kind of needle in a haystack? It can get there's all sorts of fun you can have, or I can have, because I'm a nut for terminology. But sometimes you need a little chaos, so that you don't only get honed in on, like, that's the danger to me of experts, is that they've already blocked out a bunch of stuff because it never worked, right? Or, they tried it several times. And then maybe something brand new comes along, like AI is not new. Generative AI is relatively new, but the things that used to be impossible are no longer impossible, right? And the price point is collapsing rapidly. Having some externalized sort of way to bring in different opinions than like the yes man kind of scenario. Why ignore the young minds that they do think differently? So take advantage of that, for God's sakes.
No, and I couldn't imagine an organization that doesn't, right? Let's be honest, right? Obviously, we recognize the economy is changing, the marketplace for talent is changing. And I would be remiss if I didn't suggest that. But the reality is, I could not imagine an organization, let's just say just of our size, of our even peer group organizations, of hiring fresh talent. And again, you're not asking this, but I'm not here to suggest AI is taking jobs. It's here to amplify every single person. And that's what we're so excited about is, yes, we're still going to hire from campus. It's going to change, of course, as you would always expect. But we're empowering all of our people to not just have the apprenticeship model and follow the apprenticeship model, but empowering them with the tools to amplify their daily work so they can get 10x, 100x more done in their day jobs. But also, by the way, and this is not cliche, but something you asked me as we were preparing for this conversation is like, what's working and what's not working. What's working is, as we find people can bring it back to adopting on their own terms. AI is not a change. It's not a change management exercise. It's not a tool. I just say that openly. It's not like it's one singular tool. We know it's a mindset. And so when we marry, adaptability, agency, changing on your own terms, empowering people to make that change, we're finding people freeing up time that give them the time back to be with their friends and their family, do the things they want to do outside of work that gets their mind at a different place. So it's not always about work. We're finding that, working at scale, which then, as you kind of alluded to, is there's the consumer side of innovation, but then enterprise innovation, it now frees up people to think differently and think about the next convergence theme and think about the next dots need to be connected when they're not laser focused on just doing it for work. That's a bit of some of the secret sauce that's really worked well for us, aside from, having a dedicated team that really pushes the, I would say, innovation agenda. And we've got some frameworks to think about, and I'm happy to share this with your team, with your audience here, because they're interesting for how we think about this. So it's, I really enjoy this conversation because most folks want to talk about AI, but I'm happy to do that too.
So one of the things I've seen innovation projects go off the rails is a lack of focus, which is funny because in some ways you sort of don't want to focus because that's how you find other things, right? So the classic inside the box, outside the box. But from an impact standpoint, you need to frame something like, you can't say, and I've seen this, we need to innovate. Go innovate. What is that? So I used to joke about, I guess I still think this is the good example. So financial innovation is a little dangerous because that's potentially cooking the books and faking numbers, right? So maybe you don't need creative accounting. But in most other areas, it's totally cool to sort of throw away the rules. But how do you think about, how do you, either personally within your team or PwC at large, when you're steering a ship of, at this point, 75,000 people, you can't just tell them to all wing it and and innovate.
Yeah, there's kind of a method to the madness, and let me start. I appreciate the question. It's definitely not like we're definitely not winging it. There is some organized chaos. I mean, chaos in a good way, and I like to frame it kind of personally from a place of it's like 1/3 art, 1/3 science, and 1/3 luck. That's color.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Again, okay. What does that really mean? So that's kind of one person's opinion, and there's a lot of luck involved too. Let's be honest, right? Timing, all the kind of things. And it's like, well, yeah, we miss a lot of things, but if you're not out there trying, then you're going to miss them all, right?
Right.
We like to frame it to make it very real and tangible, Dan. We've always had different methodologies and frameworks to think about, strategic foresights, and gleaning insights from what patterns we're seeing. And that's really what we're talking about here. I don't have a crystal ball, and if I did, or you did, or any of your listeners did, we would definitely not be on this. I'd be here on this podcast giving you lottery numbers right now. That's not right. This is, there's part of the futurist is, seeing patterns and kind of. I hate to predict. I don't like to predict, but we see patterns and we make some educated guesses that they're art, science, and speculation, but also luck. Mm-hmm. Think about it, and kind of the framing is this. As opposed to just kind of throwing everything at a wall and spaghetti at a wall, which was, I see we used to do that, but regular businesses do that. We structure it by way of horizons. And you're like, well, look across the horizon. Yes, it's very out there. And I would suggest, Dan, there's no one singular horizon. You're like, where are you going? Mm-hmm. And yes, we can look across the horizon singular. I would suggest, and what has worked really well for us, is looking at multiple horizons. So for us, let's go backwards. So Horizon 3, 3+ years, how do you time scale that? The things that are not here today, they're here today, but our clients aren't asking for them. right?
Mm,
And
okay.
no one's asking for it, but we see hints of what's coming. So this is 2 to 3 years out. The technology just isn't tangible, or if it is, it's purely like in a lab somewhere, which is tangible, but it's just not here for mass consumption. So there's Horizon 3, 2+ years into the future. We could suggest 5. I think it gets very fuzzy after 3.5, but here we are. Horizon 3 is where we think about perspectives, kind of putting a stake in the ground for what we think might be coming from a thematic perspective. The kind of the Horizon 2 working backwards, like the work backwards at PwC, Dan. Horizon 2 are things that we are sort of here. We're starting to see signals by way of either direct inquiry from clients or the firm. The firm happens to be one of my biggest clients or commercial clients. And they're starting to ask. And they're starting to ask, but not at any kind of like influx of demand. So Horizon 2 for us, Dan, are making it real by hands-on proof of concept. So we're building. So taking ideas into engineering. So taking concepts and putting hands on keyboard and building against those things to truly prove or disprove they can be made real.
So as far as like staffing and skills, do you talk about like anthropology and ethnography and sort of living and observing? Kaizen, there's a whole bunch of terms that are potentially wrapped up in that, but it's more than whiteboarding, right? It's the who's the guy that wrote the Force Up to the Epiphany, the UC Berkeley, I think it was.
You can Google it faster. I want to get on.
Yeah, well, it's like from the lean startup side of the world. Get out of your office is sort of the main key. So you can, just because you think it's a wonderful idea and your mother does and your brother and wife and friends, doesn't mean that anybody else cares, right? So go see if other people care and will pay for it at all, and then you have something, right? So so not to put more words into your mouth, but
it's
ethnography and sort of that side of looking at products, which is different than historically.
Yeah. So let me build on those two pieces on top of that. So yes, do we throw around those words? Yes, I know those are obviously very mature and established methodologies, frameworks. Not to say they're not good. Yes, and so it's not just about, again, throwing Horizon 3 reports out into the world, but something that we're very intentional about doing. Because look, Horizon 3 is kind of out there, like everything from like nanobots to thinking about space tech that's now here in the now, because 18 months ago for us, that was not a Horizon 2 thing. It is now. It's pretty exciting. I say all of that because if we were to just kind of do these reports and then project back into ourselves, everyone's like, that's really interesting as a bunch of technologists, it would live in this little silo. And so what we've done, Dan, very intentionally, is to create community around that. It comes back to how we started the conversation. Interesting technology, interesting ideas. Though, by the way, they're not just mine. They're definitely not mine. It comes from all levels. My team is comprised of associates through directors and a few other partners. I say all that because ideas come from everywhere, right? And if you have an idea, I guess we need to think about like how much time we spend on doing it. But I'm telling you this for a place of, we don't just read out to ourselves. We have opened up, we call it the R&D forum. And the R&D forum is open to every single human at PwC. I challenge the team at the beginning of every year. I say we use Teams. That's public knowledge. We use Microsoft Teams. My metric of success is breaking teams to the extent that you can no longer allow more than 2,000 people to enter the call. We're getting close. So perhaps a silly metric, but I want to have so much interest in what we're doing. We started at the beginning of the year with some new research that was like 40 people joining out of curiosity because friends invite friends. Then now it's a couple hundred, and now it's eclipsing multiple hundreds of humans. That doesn't come from a place of just inviting your friends, Dan. That comes from people who are genuinely curious outside their day job. So we are very intentional about broadcasting this out to the world. Internal, because it goes back to that community, organic reach. And we also, as you would expect of our size, is publishing thought leadership and white papers. And I say that, and I'm just going to openly say, is like, that's very important, right? Obviously, branded thought leadership, having conversations like this. But at the end of the day, it's also a function of, where do these things make their way out into the world in a non-PwC branded capacity, but they're still thought leadership of our people. And we push people to do that through patents in Horizon 2, right? Building, taking those things and putting them out. So we're measuring the success of, the thought leadership, the perspectives, across all ranges, and empowering people to do that as they see fit. And by the way, you don't have 2 months to do that. You have a 2-week sprint to get it done. All right. So by the way, 2 weeks is way too long now. We're doing 1-week sprints of build, which is pretty exciting, and showing and demonstrating value, which is pretty awesome. So we're moving fast, but not breaking trust.
Is this a opportunity to talk about AI? What is it that's driving either the desire or the ability to do 1-week sprints instead of 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, look, so it's a good question. And I think this is probably, I don't want to say universally the case, but it's moving too fast, right? Everybody who listens to your podcast, how do you keep up? And like 2-week sprints, like you're already behind on day 2 if you haven't been like following headlines or following what's going on in the world. So we were very intentional in shrinking just the development cycle, with the understanding is that I'm okay if the test breaks or the environment breaks when you're demoing it at the end of in your retro. That's fine. It's forcing people to just keep shipping, right? And so for us, it's a function of kind of just, for us, it's forcing. We don't force people to do anything. We're forcing people to move fast, don't break things too much, but just show it. Show it, don't tell it, right? Is it show it? So that's really kind of inculcated in our culture, Dan. So that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. For customer work, our customers, how are they keeping pace with this, 1 week, 2 week? I mean, there's a lot of organizations that, they think in terms of 10 or 20 years is like a fast innovation cycle, right? So, which is a huge opportunity because you can do almost anything. And so my term for that is slingshotting. So if we take that bell curve, if you wait long enough and you're falling backwards, sooner or later that tension will get to the point where a whole bunch of things have converged. I usually talk about distributed convergence, which pulls together a bunch of disconnected stuff. And then suddenly you can jump straight into, I still keep talking about the 21st century like it's a new thing, but we're 25 years into it. But you can bypass a whole bunch of stuff, which is honestly is probably a lot smarter than the way I did it, which is to slog through the whole damn thing. So what are you saying from a customer perspective? Is part of the role of PwC or your team specifically? I don't know, to give them permission to accelerate, or do you run into friction there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say this, let me kind of double down on the fact that like our 1-week sprint's a universal thing across PwC. We're not there yet. We're not, but within our technology innovation office, we're absolutely pushing that agenda because it's our not just our job, but we have to push the firm that way, right? And so let me be very clear on the commercial side, because everything that we do ends up being commercial. We're not just innovating for the sake of the firm, but everything that we do, ideally, how do we measure something that we've incubated ourselves? We can move a 75,000 person organization with the scale and speed, whether it's with or without AI, but any kind of innovation, whether that be a process, an operating model, or a technology. If we can do that to ourselves, and we talk often about drinking our own champagne, and then use that as the proverbial kind of case study, because it's not something the world's seen before, but we've done it for ourselves, and let us share with you, commercial entity client X, how we've done it. And they're not all that way, but we like to use that as a mechanism or a high watermark of how we innovate. That becomes very compelling for our customers because, wait, you did it for yourself. Now let's do it for us.
So on the storytelling front, part of what we talked about before we got on here was that you and I, our roles are typically like bridge builders between different worlds that don't necessarily talk the same language, right? So for me, I usually talk about like, I tried to learn French. It didn't really work. It was enough for my wife and I on our honeymoon to not be completely embarrassed, to not know any French. So they would feel bad and just take my order and like, just tell me in English what you want to eat, sir. But I'm good at translating between business people and technology people, and that could be, internally, or it could be with customers. It could be a number of different situations. And it sounds like you have that same sort of, I think of it as a superpower because it just makes it so much easier, because otherwise they just have no ability to talk to each other. Do you hire to find people that already have that skill set? Do you train to try to help create that internally or for customers? How does that pan out?
And so to answer your question, we very intentionally, yes, upskill every human on all the topics you would expect. But the secret sauce of being an innovation leader, in my mind, is when you create the culture, create the mechanisms, somewhat organically, but sometimes let them come on their own, where people are kind of colliding and kind of learning on their own within guardrails. Still going to deliver, but that's where the real is comes. So yes, we're upskilling. We're very intentionally architecting teams that have very diverse thinking and diverse backgrounds. I love the English majors as much as I love the statistician, as I love having the programmer on the team, developer on the team. We need.
Yeah. It's sort of out of fashion to talk about design thinking these days. Is that a bad word or phrase within PwC, or is that still how you talk about it?
No, I think we still throw lots of words around, and nothing's bad or wrong. Look, we're a massive firm, let's be honest. I think one of my colleagues has put it best as a recent LinkedIn article, is this push and pull of what does it mean to lead when you've got a UX who has their UX, generally speaking, that domain of how they think and how they work, and then product, and then engineering. It's like, and I'm gonna misquote it, but essentially it's like products are like, when do we ship? When are we gonna ship? UX is it just, will someone use it? Right? And then it's like, well, we gotta deliver on time. We gotta deliver against the sprint. It's like, those are very different, but regular questions we should be asking. But how do you lead through that kind of triad of design thinking, but product thinking, product minds? We just boil it down to, Dan, is like, are you building for people? Is what you're building be usable, functional, not by way of features, but will someone use this? Now that's a loaded question, but we're building for people. We're not, by the way, people and machines, let's be honest, but that's what we're really after here. We're not trying to get carbon frameworks and methodologies. Let's go back to GSD and do it in a way that doesn't break trust.
I do like to ask, so the concept of Next Future Today, this podcast, is to empower people to take action. So it works out wonderfully with the whole perception of the way that you go about things at PwC and with your team. So for people who are innovation shy or sensitive or outright afraid, anything that you would take from a success story or a failure story, because there's plenty to be learned from failures too, which people tend to want to bury.
So here's what I would say, and this isn't to be cliche. We talk often about, as innovation leaders, as architects, as whatever title you carry, we talk often about the art of the possible. Mm-hmm. I'm going to challenge that, and I'm just going to say, in the age of AI, everything is possible. Anything is possible. I said the secret sauce. The magic is finding what's probable. That's kind of where my challenge out to your audience is so how do you determine what's probable? And they're like, this is so simple. Why wouldn't I do this? Are people already doing this? Be intentional about bringing your team together. Right? So this is something that, as a failure, not a failure, but we found very quickly in being a distributed team, we don't come together enough. We don't get to the office enough. And you're like, that sounds so silly. Return to office is a thing, but when we could collide and literally create physical collisions over the water cooler in the same room, locking ourselves in a space, I think we have found that we accelerate finding probable. So it sounds a bit simple, but sometimes the best ideas are those that are really just that simple. Get people together, spend time with them in person, ideally, and then infuse that into your culture. I think that would pay dividends for any leader listening to your podcast, Dan.
Well, that's fantastic. And we've timed it almost perfectly so you can jump on your next call. But Larry, thank you so much for joining. Great to get you officially on record.
It's been a lot of fun, Dan. I appreciate you very much. And I hope you get much continued success in the podcast, and look forward to listening in too.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Larry.